Good morning and welcome back to Sunday Storytime here on Gaming with ADHD. And today we're going to be reading Enemy Within from the pages of the Warhammer 40,000 Combat Patrol magazine by Hachette Publications and Games Workshop. Enemy Within. Beneath a bruised purple sky, the survivors of Decima Squad fell back across the barren landscape, seeking a more defensible position. The sun had not shone in weeks, blotted out by clouds of alien spores that seemed to grow ever denser. Progress was slow, and with each step, thick, acidic mud sucked at their boots. It was as if the whole landscape was slowly being digested. Where once trees had once been plentiful, now all that remained was a foul-smelling vegetable slurry. The only things that grew here now were tall spires of alien appearance. Cutter tried to avoid looking at their serrated forms, not daring to guess as what their origin or purpose might be. Instead, she focused her gaze on the Imperial bunker that rose in the distance, their salvation. The squad's progress was made slower by the weight of Jones, who leaned heavily on Cutter's shoulder as she helped him limp along. He had been wounded in their previous engagement, but she refused to leave him behind as he'd insisted. He was, after all, the only reason she was still alive. She shuddered as she thought back to yesterday's events. They'd been out on patrol, scouting out the enemy's position for an artillery bombardment, when a dark shadow had suddenly swooped down upon them. Two of her squad mates had been ripped to shreds before they even knew what was happening. A huge bat-winged creature slashed and tore at them with its limbs and stabbed out with a long tail that ended in a vicious stinger. She remembered her limbs turning heavy as ferrocrete as she looked into its hideous, snarling face, convinced that this was the moment of her death. Then Jones, the brave fool, had rushed forward with his lasgun, firing point blank into the creature and jabbing at it with his bayonet. Enraged, it had lashed out at him with its barbed tail, scoring a nasty wound into his abdomen before beating its leathery wings and flying away. "So how's the hero of the hour doing?" she asked, masking her genuine concern with sarcasm. "It itches," Jones replied through gritted teeth. "It itches like you wouldn't believe." "Don't worry. Doc says it's just a flesh wound. No internal damage. We'll be playing scrumball again in no time." Jones smiled, but Cutter could see that he was trying to hide the pain. The rest of the march was undertaken in near silence as the exhausted remains of Decima Squad made their way across the tainted wasteland to the bunker. Cutter noticed the uneasy glances to the sky. They were all fearful of the winged nightmare would return. As they approached the bunker, everything was eerily quiet. Overturned ammo crates and spare kit littered the ground, and anything that could not be easily carried had been left behind. Overhead, a shadow flitted through the sky. "Enemy sighted!" yelled Cutter. "Wilkins, Jefferson, covering fire," ordered Sergeant Wayland. "The rest of you, get inside." They opened fire, filling the air with the distinctive crack of las bolts and the whine of recharging power cells. The creature above darted and dived, avoiding their shots before disappearing once more into the darkness. Still shouldering Jones's weight, she headed for the open door of the bunker, the rest of the squad following behind. When the last of Decima Squad were inside, they sealed the heavy blast doors shut. Cutter eased Jones down onto the floor at the rear of the room, resting his back as comfortably as she could against the wall. His face was covered with sweat, and he was convulsing and muttering something to himself. "Sarge, Jones is acting strangely," she said. "He's feverish," Wayland replied, kneeling down to inspect the injured guardsman. "The wound's probably just infected." Jones let out a long, agonized scream, and then they saw it. Something writhing and squirming beneath his flesh. Tiny claws burst out of his skin, tearing and rending at his body from the inside. Cutter felt bile rising in her throat as she saw a toothed maw chew its way out of his abdomen and flop to the floor. "Emperor's throne!" she swore. Jones's body ruptured violently in a shower of gore and viscera, spattering the assembled soldiers with blood. Suddenly they were surrounded by newly spawned rippers, which left crimson trails in their wake as they skittered across the floor. One of them leapt up and burrowed itself into Wayland's leg, chewing through flesh and bone in mere seconds. Cutter jumped back, drawing her sidearm and firing into the frenzied creatures emerging from the hollowed-out ruin that had once been Jones, but there were too many. Her comrades lay on the floor around her, thrashing and screaming as the ravenous monstrosity swarmed over them, devouring their still-living flesh. Not like this, she thought, unslinging a bandolier of frag grenades. If I'm going out, I'm taking you filth with me. Muttering a final prayer to the Emperor, she yanked out a pin from one of the grenades and dropped the bandolier into an open ammo crate. A second later, her world was filled with sound and fire. And then nothing.